Okay, we are live. We are go for lunch, as Chris Martin would say.
Go for lunch. Hungry. Good evening. I'd like to call the Henrietta Town Board Workshop meeting for January 11, 2021 to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember
Here.
Councilmember Stafford.
Here.
Councilmember Safranek.
Here.
Councilmember Boltner.
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. We'll begin tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have two special use permits. One for a day spa and one for a landscaping snow removal business. Could we go, what's it?
Could I get it? The one for the landscaping snow removal business, there wasn't an address on that for Brighton Henrietta Townland Road on the.
Does anyone know the address?
We can find out later.
Okay. We have 3 public hearings. Endangering tree for 70 Cape Cod Way. Proposed law to amend the town code to require minimum buffering to historic properties. And Riverton Parcel E, Park Grove Realty. This is the one that there had been previous public hearings, but as we were waiting for information back from them, we closed public hearings with the intention to reopen it. So this is the reopen. That's the one I expect will chew up a lot of time. There is significant neighborhood pushback from that. And we, the town board, had concerns regarding traffic and some other issues with it. So like I said, I expect that one to be a little lengthy. In the event that we do decide to approve them, we put together both the seeker and the special use permit resolutions, because if we do approve them, as we've already spoken, there would be a number of conditions placed on those. And so we wanted to capture all those rather than try to capture it on the fly, like sometimes, we do some of the public special use permits. I mentioned that because sometimes residents see that those are already there and they say, oh, you've already approved it. No, we have not, but we want to be prepared so that we don't miss any of the restrictions placed on it in the event that we do decide to approve it. Questions and comments on parcel E? See that it's bolded.
It was for 3 and 4, and basically, if the question was, a lot of times after a public hearing, we don't approve them right away. We don't approve them until the next meeting.
So that will depend on what comes up at this public hearing, because again, this is, I think, our 4th public hearing on this.
Yep.
I don't know that we're going to hear anything new other than what, the responses with regards from the county in terms of the traffic. Plain and simple, we've got them in here now. If we decide that something new has come up, or for whatever reason we're not ready to make the decision Wednesday night, then we would table those. But again, I want to have them present. And like I said, for some of the larger decisions, especially rezoning, where we typically, our standard operating procedure is to wait a meeting. Again, this is our 4th public hearing, so we've already waited multiple times.
This is the first time, though, that we've seen the completed seeker report.
Correct. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it's also possible that we, if we find that it matches what we kind of thought, then you know, we might make the decision to go forward, might not. Simply put, the way the county has kind of punted it down the road, they basically said at this particular point in time, they don't feel that it necessitates a change at that intersection, but they intend to monitor the traffic situation, and if it ever does get to where that intersection, the intersection being Scottsville West Henrietta Road and East River Road, that if it ever gets to the point where it requires control, that they will put it in. It's not clear to me, the way they said it to me made it sound like they would, there would be some charge back to the developers. It wouldn't just be this one, the other developer they were talking about who was potentially contributing to the issues at that intersection was the Howlett development across the way, but that it wasn't clear to me whether the county would pick up the total dime or whether they would charge a portion of that back to the developers. My answer is going to be the developer has to take that risk. That's up to them. If they want to hammer that out before approval, then we would have to table it. So I don't know what the way the developer is going to answer, but
what's the county's method to doing that? Do you know? Have they
doing which? Monitoring it, or?
Let's say 5 years down the road, we need to do something. How are they going to have the developer pay for that?
That I have no idea.
If all the credits have been given back to them and
Well, no, there's no credits given back. We are requiring them to pay their seeker mitigation fees. I don't know whether they're going to use some of the portion from that instead of applying it all to the general use, the general corridor improvements. I don't know whether I don't know what mechanism, Don. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
Which again is part of the reason why I've said to them that I don't know if there's a risk. They may say, you know what, once we have approval, we don't have a way to deal with it, but they obviously can't hold up approval to see 5 years after approval whether there's any traffic necessitating it, because you don't see the traffic until the approval happens. So again, I don't know whether the approval is going to happen. I just know that, like I said, one of the things that's up in the air is how they're going to handle targeted improvements. Maybe Monroe County DOT would pick up the tab. I heard someone chime in.
Me. I thought I had read something, and I may be incorrect, that said something almost to the point that they put it in some kind of a bank account, kind of like what we do with trees, but they put it into a bank account. They take the funds and then it's there if they need it. Am I incorrect?
So that's what we're doing with the mitigation fees. I don't know if they're going to charge them additional. So essentially they put them in escrow.
That's kind of what it sounded like to me, right?
Right. So in our case, the charge, so as part of the comprehensive land use update plan, we implemented the findings from the East River Road corridor study, which basically looked at the general improvements along the corridor that would be necessary, primarily at, I think it was 5 intersections, although there were a couple stretches that were in between intersections, to improve the flow of traffic along the whole corridor. And we then basically, they took a portion of that and assigned it to future developments. And the way we apportioned it amongst the future developments is we estimated what those future developments, how much traffic would they add to the corridor itself. And then we divided the cost by the number of expected trips. So they only really look at the AM and PM peak trips, because if I'm there at 1 in the afternoon, there's so much capacity, you know, the roads are essentially capacity bound at the peak times. If they're capacity bound at other times, then they're going to have real issues at peak. And so we look at the peak travel trips. And so, you know, it worked out to, if I remember the numbers correctly, it was $800 per trip. So if they're putting 50 vehicles into the AM peak and 50 vehicles in the PM peak, that's 100 trips. So they would owe $80,000. And that would go into a fund that is specifically, it can only be spent for improvements to the East River Road corridor. But again, most of those are already planned. And those plans did not include an improvement to this intersection. You can argue whether that was an oversight on the county, whether they, I don't know that they looked that far south, but when we did the corridor study and put it into the plan, we absolutely said it's really the whole length. In fact, this development, I don't remember if it was this one. I think it was the Queens Park one. There were other developments in this area that were included in the list of potential projects, and shown that, yeah, their full contribution to the, in other words, their full amount of traffic that they're putting on the corridor. And put on the corridor means that they're either driving on East River Road or they're crossing East River Road through one of the intersections. That any of that traffic was included in the calculation to determine the seeker mitigation amount. There was the developer at one point was only counting the traffic that went north from Erie Station Road, but that is not how the calculations were done. And I put together an extensive review of those documents and stuff, working with Terry Rice, who is the town's consultant, and with Don Young, our town attorney, to show how clearly it's the amount of traffic that was put on it. Now, what would be easiest is if you just said the amount of all the traffic there, but if you actually read the study, any of the traffic that's in parcel E that goes west out over the 253 bridge to Scottsville is not included in the count. So again, if they have 100 vehicles that come out of the development at peak time and 7 of them go west and the other 93 go east, we would only count the 93 times 800, because the 7 going west do not essentially effectively enter the corridor. They never touch East River Road. And you see that because when you look at the industrial developments along Erie Station Road to the east of East River, their numbers are really tiny because most of those vehicles are going to head eastbound out through Thruway Park up to 15. They're not going to go west to East River and then back over. So there are some who would be coming down from Ballantyne Bridge, which is why those numbers are non-zero. But like I said, clearly the majority of the traffic, if you pay attention to the traffic flow on East River Road, the majority of the traffic on the industrial sites on the Erie Station Road head east, they don't head west. So when you look at the study, it's pretty clear how the stuff was calculated.
So maybe just to head off some sort of legal or technical discussion for Wednesday night, I just wanted to quickly touch on traffic impacts in general when we're dealing with land use applications, which a special use permit is a land use application like a site plan or a subdivision. And one of the impacts we're told to look at when we're conducting seeker is traffic. So typically when you look at an impact, you look at the current impact given the, you look at the projected impact of the projects being proposed, given the current situation, in this case, that would be background traffic or existing traffic, and also given any
Future growth?
Well, given not hypothetical future projects, but actual future projects. We call it looking at the cumulative impact. So if we also knew across the way we had another big development that's been proposed or a concept came before us, that's something we could include. But when you start going so far out as, we think we're going to get a projection growth of 3% a year and 10 years down the road, that's going to do this, that tends to go beyond the scope of what you're doing in seeker. That's more of traffic planning. And that's what, when communities have done things like that, they've gotten sued and they've lost because they're basically say you're charging them for impacts that aren't a result of their project. You're charging them a tax when really roads are supposed to be paid via a highway tax. If you want to have a system like that, then you need to either implement a transportation development district, which we've done in the case of Marketplace Mall, or you need to conduct a widespread generic seeker study and assess based on a specific area, which is what we've done with the East River Road corridor. So they're going to pay to that, which they're required to do outside of this seeker process. We've already seekerized East River Road, and we've assigned what people are supposed to pay through our other seeker studies. So they're going to have to do that anyways. So what we're looking at here in this project now is any other impacts outside of that East River Road corridor. And I'm not a traffic engineer. I can't tell you for sure what the right conclusion is, but my understanding is there's been at least one, if not multiple traffic studies commissioned or in concert with the county. And they have some conclusions supposedly that they've drawn. So we're going to have to make a decision we're the lead agency, as you know, depending on, we're the seeker lead agency. So it's our job actually to make a determination on traffic. We've already pre-made the determination essentially on East River Road through our general study. And now we have to decide whether there's any specific impacts that this project's expected to create elsewhere at the intersection where it meets the road that the ingress egress. We can't decide that, you know, it wouldn't be proper for us to say, you know what, in 20 years, we'll probably need a light there. That's not the way you do it. You need to look at it now based on the information we have. And so we're going to have to make a decision based on the study as to whether anything's required now, or, you know, in the next year or something that has to be reasonably close to the project. If we do decide that something's required, then we need to work that out ahead of time. Here's what's required, and have them either agree to it, or if they don't agree to it, then that's when you get into positive declaration and a much longer seeker process. If they don't basically offer up as a mitigation, we're going to do this to fix this issue, then you have to start digging deeper by way of seeker. If we don't find anything, though, and we don't find that there's any basis to require anything more, which my tentative understanding is that's essentially, I think, what the county found.
I think the county did want, and Chris, if you know this answer, feel free to chime in. I believe the county wanted them to add a right turn lane, southbound right turn lane into onto West Henrietta Scottsville Road. There is a shoulder there now, so I think they were originally talking about striping, but my concern there is that would essentially effectively cut off any pedestrian or bicycle traffic. So if they are in fact requiring that right turn lane, if there isn't enough shoulder left for a pedestrian or cycling, then I would want to require that it be widened to accommodate that.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well, Steve, is that the county was going to use that widened shoulder for a right turn lane, and that they were going to monitor that T intersection to see, you know, what the traffic would be in the future, to see if, you know, maybe a signal, but more likely a three-way stop sign. So that was my understanding as well.
Yeah, so, you know, Don, one of the things I mean, obviously if you're talking well out in the future, the thing that they had is right now it's borderline, and especially, you know, during this time of COVID, the background traffic is a lot lighter, and it's been lighter for some time.
Right.
And so I don't know that there is absolutely a negative impact. The intersection goes to a grade of D, if I remember the study correctly. It drops down at least a letter grade. However, it's not considered failing, and typically the county won't, it's their road. So, I mean, even if we dictated something, if we said we wanted lights there, they'd say no way, and it wouldn't go in there, right? So, I mean, it's not quite the same thing where it's our intersection, it's our road, we get to decide how it goes. We've spoken to them about our interest in control of some form, and they've basically said that based on their numbers right now, it does not warrant it.
The county being
The
them?
county has said
Yeah.
that. And again, Chris or Craig, correct me if I'm misstating something here. But that they understand that it's close, and that, you know, if it gets to that point, that they could see, they talked about a three-way stop. I don't know from the sounds of talking to them, whereas residents might be interested in it, it did not sound like they were at all interested in a traffic light. I contend that like there's a number of traffic lights that work exceedingly well, like the one at Brooks and West Henrietta Road, that I think would improve the traffic flow there, but they sound uninterested in it. And again, we have no authority to require the county to do it. It's a county road.
Yeah.
So, you know, in terms of that specific intersection upgrade, in my opinion, it's the county's decision, excuse me, barring the thing I spoke about earlier about not wanting to remove the pedestrian and bicycle access to that intersection. It's the county's decision as to how that intersection is controlled, not the town's. And if
Right.
they feel it's a particular way, that's fine. What I don't know, again, and this also goes back to your question about could they sue the county? They might, depending on how the county tries to rule it and say, well, you know, we're going to require 50,000 in escrow in the event that we have to control it. I don't know. I'm just making something up. To my knowledge, they've not asked anything, but again, I've not seen 100% definitive statement as to how they're going to handle it. To my point, it's beyond us. It's between the developer and the
Yeah.
county, not between the
So,
town and the
and I
county.
bring it up now because as the local attorney presiding of the government that's presiding over seeker, because you're the lead agency, I don't know that really it's your jurisdiction to get into the kinds of future looking things that the county seems to be thinking about.
Right.
You know, if the county came back with their study and said, yeah, we need one, or we're going to need one so soon that we're going to suggest that, yes, you need to put one in, then we should require that we should have them offer that should be required mitigation. But since they haven't gotten to that point, I don't know how within the confines of at least a seeker negative declaration, we would be able to require them to do something like that outside, again, of doing a general impact statement or transportation development
Right.
district. If the county says for planning purposes, we might do this 10 years down the road, that's the county's thing. That's not this developer's thing.
Right.
And so I just want to clarify that for purposes of traffic, should this question come up Wednesday.
Right. I guess, like I said, my position is if the county is going to try to, because they didn't definitively state to us, you need to collect $40,000 in mitigation fees for improvements to this intersection, that anything that could potentially be collected is between the county and them. It's not on this town board to impose it via our seeker.
Yeah, and really, they can't really do that. They can't tell us that we need to collect extra money. The only reason why we have that relationship now is because of the TDD and then the East River Road corridor. We've set that up voluntarily. They couldn't impose that on us, although they could say, we need this intersection to be signalized on their review. They could say, we need this intersection to be signalized, and then that would burden us as a seeker lead agency how to figure out how to get that intersection signalized. At that point, we might say, okay,
Right.
can they offer to pay? Can they install it themselves? But they haven't done that here.
Right. I agree. Yeah. No, even, and my suspicion of if it just goes to a three-way stop, I suspect it's just the county that's going to do it because let's face it, from a cost standpoint,
Yeah.
it's probably spend more on lawyer fees getting the developer to pay for it than the cost of putting in the stop
Right.
signs themselves. So I suspect that's where they're at. But like I said, I've not heard a definitive statement. Part of the problem is the individual who was running Monroe County DOT retired.
Right.
Jim is still acting, correct? Oh, he is now official. Okay, so they do have a new director. But obviously some of that, our longstanding communications have changed recently. Jim's
Yeah.
doing a great job not getting up to speed, but the point is reestablishing that. But there's no question with that and the end of the year and over the holidays that it's not as smooth or straightforward as it once was.
Right.
But it's getting there.
If they do require that, if we do want that added right turn lane, we should have the developer explicitly offer it. either tomorrow, preferably in writing.
Okay.
Because that way they're,
What I want to see from them is, I'm assuming, like I said, I want to see what I don't know how wide the shoulder is.
okay.
Chris, did we get a drawing that includes that right turn lane?
Steve, it's Chris Martin. Not to my knowledge. I want to say it's about 8 feet typical, but we would have to go out and verify that. So no, we don't have a drawing to my knowledge.
Yeah, because that's what I would want to see. I don't know how wide the shoulder is today, how much of it would be eaten up by the right turn lane. So for instance, again, using the intersection I'm more familiar with, Brooks and West Henrietta Road, the shoulder southbound is the width of a car. That's it. So if you put in a turning lane, the stripe would go right to the edge of the pavement. I don't know if that's the same on East River Road, which again would basically mean then bicyclists or pedestrians to get to that intersection would have to ride or walk through traffic, which I'd prefer that not be the case. So, Chris, did the county, did I read that correctly? The county is requiring that? Did we get that definitive statement? I know they were talking about it. I didn't know if they specifically required it.
I want to say they specifically required it, or certainly in their letter, they strongly suggested it. I don't know if it was an actual requirement yet or not. But we can certainly find out for you before Wednesday.
Yeah, please do, because that, like I said, that to me, from our standpoint, is the only remaining question. Is there anyone who disagrees with that? We ought to require pedestrian and cyclist access next to that turning lane?
No disagreement here.
Yeah, no, I think
Okay. Yeah, so if you could find out, and Chris, if you're at it, just ask them, bring that up with the county, say, hey, we're looking to make sure that pedestrians and cyclists aren't funneled into that right turn lane.
Can do.
Okay, appreciate it. Feel free to use Craig to, if needed. Always happy to volunteer. Craig's at the time. Any other questions on this one? I will note that they did come back, the developer did come back and offer additional buffering to the south. So again, that they'll be presenting that Wednesday night. I'll see, do we have any updated plans that show that, Chris?
Say that again, Steve.
Whether we have any plans in hand yet that show, I got the letter, I saw the letter from the developer stating that they're increasing the buffering and landscaping to the south to provide more separation to the homes there. Do we have anything, a drawing that shows what that is yet? Or are they presenting that at the public hearing?
I know they submitted a drawing. They submitted an overall drawing for the whole Riverton parcel. They gave that to us the other day. No, I have not seen that drawing, but again, I can talk to the developer's engineer to see if they'll have something for tomorrow's or Wednesday's meeting.
Yeah, and if you could get that and send it out electronically to the board prior, so it's easier for us to view it than having to read for those of us whose eyes don't focus as clearly as they once did at that distance.
Thank you. I was going to request the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I think that covers us for 3 and 4.
Before you move on to the next one, can I go back and answer Mike's question about Brighton Henrietta Town Line, the special use permit location?
Absolutely.
It took me a second to pull up the parcel map, but let me do a share screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at. Oh, I lost you guys. Okay. So this is,
Oh, it doesn't have an address. Is that the
it
problem?
doesn't have an address. That's why, but this is the location here highlighted.
And is that,
What building is
so the road across the top,
Brighton Henrietta Town Line, I think?
Is Brighton Henrietta Town Line, and then I don't know if you can see my mouse. This is West Henrietta. And this is Brighton Henrietta Town Line.
Up,
What's the old DJs, 1771.
okay, the one on the one on the left is BJ's.
DJs.
Okay.
That's the, I don't want to say it's a Ketney's house, it's a Asian food market, I believe, on the east.
Okay.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And so,
It's Action Auto that looks to be taking up the southern, moving into the southern portion of that.
okay, so it goes up between the Asian food market and that Monroe Muffler or whatever. There's a auto place, the auto body shop there.
A lot of wetlands back there.
And then, so it just goes in the back. Okay.
But Craig, would I be able to get Craig to move closer to a microphone?
Yeah, how's that? Any better?
That's so much better, Craig. The rest of us virtually can hear you.
Yeah, I was just mentioning that Action Auto looks to be moving in on the south side, and the property is to the east of the BJ's facility. I don't know if there's an existing curb cut.
I just realized why the road appears to disappear into a big field. That's was taken during the construction of the Delta Sonic. Is that what's going on at the corner with West Henrietta Road there?
Must be.
From back here, it looks like the road just kind of ends in a parking lot.
Yeah, this is the 2018 imagery. I don't know if that's helpful or if it's better to see it in
No,
like this.
like I said, that's what was throwing me was the Delta Sonic construction site. It made it look like, because a lot of the roads off of Town Line Road, like they disappear into parking lots. The road doesn't exactly end, especially some of the junkyards or auto places, they just kind of become the parking lot. And that's what it looked like was happening to the left there. But then I realized, no, that's the all of the Delta Sonic construction, parking lot stuff.
I see where it is now.
Yep, I get it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Number 5, consider adopting a local law to amend the Henrietta Town Code to require minimum buffering to historic properties. So if you remember when we, well, half of you were there, but when we did the comprehensive land use update, we included buffering for between a new development going in and existing properties. And the size of that buffer changed depending on what the adjacent property was. So for instance, if an industrial was going in next to a home, it was 100 feet. If it was going in next to a park or a school, it was 150 feet. We didn't have historic sites on there listed expressly. And so we just wanted to include historic sites in the school or park category, which was the most restrictive, the largest buffer required. Those numbers were done, we'd done some research. They were, for lack of a better way to put it, vetted by the GEIS process. So I'd be reticent to create a newer, larger buffer than the largest that was already there. There was someone on the historic site who suggested, well, why not go to 250 feet? To give you an idea, if we did that, that would mean more than 40%, I think only 40% of their property would be available for development because the rest would all be off limits to that buffer. So, at some point you impose too much of a hardship to the point where it could be seen as an illegal taking. I think the 150 number is a good compromise. Now, one of the things we've talked about down the road is, could we do something where under Article 10, they have to do an Article 10 review of a development going in next to a historical site to make sure there's no buildings that impose in that 250. So if I had to keep 150 green, and then beyond that, to 250, could only have parking lots. And then from there, I'd have buildings. That leaves a lot more of that, potential site available for development. They just have to position things accordingly. When you basically say 250 feet of it is off limits to anything, that just makes it, again, too tough, too much of a burden on the developer. So the good news is with the plan that is coming back from Delphi, they've actually already moved the building more than 250 feet away. So in this one, it's a moot point. But, it's something, like I said, that I think as we've talked about doing some code improvements, that we do it under an Article 10 review, because then you can look at it on an individual case. And if, the person comes in and has a site plan and they really can't get to 250, but they can get to 225, and we determine that, without imposing hardship on the property owner, that's the best way to protect the historic properties, then, that's the whole point of an Article 10 vote. So the idea would be to do something like that under there. But this one would be irrespective of Article 10. This one would be, that they'd have that 150-foot buffer.
My question is, even with that buffer, does a new space have to be done under Article 10? I think that creates a whole nother issue.
No, Article 10 only applies to an existing
It
historic
currently only
property.
applies to the existing stuff.
Exactly. So if we expand the buffer, do we have to do that new expansion and attach Article 10? Is my question.
Currently, the answer is no. That's
Okay.
what I was saying is, could
Right.
we do something? We would have to rewrite the code to enable that to come under Article 10. And, I'd have to sit down with Don as to, what are the bounds of state law that would allow us to do that?
And that's my whole question. If we do rewrite the law, does it have to fall on Article 10? That's my question.
This one does not.
I know this one does not, but if you look at all the laws and you rewrite the buffer, do
No.
we want to really attach an Article 10 to it?
Buffer, in this case,
We're on the same line.
they're two separate things.
Right.
So after we've done this, we
Uh-huh.
would take a look at whether it makes sense to expand Article 10 out further from the property.
Okay.
The first thing we have to check is there legal authority to do that?
Mhm.
And then if so, how do we define that? And so what would happen is then so let's say that, because again, remember, this buffer only involves new development next to existing. Now, obviously, there's no such thing as new historical development, right?
Right.
If I'm building it new, it's not historic. So it's always the existing historic, but the question is down the road, we look at, as we're looking at the sight lines, especially since some of the historic properties, their property lines are very narrow, right? And so one of the whole points of the Article 10 is to not diminish the view of that historic building, especially from a street frontage standpoint. Well, if I have very narrow lot lines and the neighbor puts up a fence that blocks all on their property, that blocks and restricts the view of the historic property, because maybe the historic property was set back, but their property, which isn't classified historic, but was grandfathered, is up front, then that can cause some issues. And so the question is, do we have the right to, impose Article 10 beyond the bounds of the original property? I don't know that answer. I'm just saying that's something I do want to look into in the future. Donna, I don't know if you know that answer off the top of the head, or I presume it's something you would have to research.
It's going to be all case law based on the individual facts. And I think the example you gave does a pretty good job of exemplifying perhaps going too far with that kind of thing. If you live next door to a historic house, now you can't put up a fence. Now you can't, put a pool in. Now you can't, you've now lost a lot of rights that you might have otherwise had before such a law came into place.
Right.
That's different than our buffer law, which says if you're building something new altogether, if you're building a major development, you can't be within 150 feet. There's got to be a buffer.
Right.
I think that's a little different.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think we need to be
And
cautious. The saving grace though is that we always have seeker. So anything that would come before the board that would require a seeker review, those are usually anything substantial would come before us anyways. That would require us to look at it from a seeker standpoint, which does require us to look at historic impacts. And so we can also use that to deal with visual impacts. As I talk about this though, the buffer might apply in the situation we just talked about because a fence is a new piece of construction. So
yeah, but again, when it was talked about, when you read the section of the code we're talking about, it's not them just adding a fence to an existing, it's, as you said, it's basically formerly vacant land that's being developed.
yeah,
And they were predominantly looking at buildings and parking lots, those types of structures.
yep,
Fences are not necessarily out of the question within that 150-foot buffer. That would be up to planning board. The point being, if the fence helps provide a visual buffer, as in, a screen to the development, that could be, in other words, that is allowed within that buffer.
right. That might be a good
Because
thing.
again, the point is whether it's a hedgerow, a line of, technically arborvitaes, a row of green giant arborvitae are considered a fence. If they are close enough together to provide a visual barrier, they are, under our legal definition, a fence. And so those are allowed inside the buffer upon approval of the site plan. The planning board has the discretionary authority as to what can go into that buffer. But, what it talks about is essentially, again, no buildings or parking lots. But screening is included in that.
I'll be
Buffer
interested
area.
to see what you come up with.
Yeah, I don't know whether we're going to be able to, and as to Don's point, it might be something listed in Article 10 that just basically says, the town shall consider the following during seeker, with anything that's within, like SHPO, I think uses 300 feet. Now that's not from the property line, that's 300 feet from the structure. At least based on how they're ruling over near Tinker. So they do a 300-foot buffer around the physical structure itself. So, I just want us to have some consistency to it. So, if we come in and say, suddenly that this development's coming in and we say, oh, well, we're going to look at the historic. Well, you never did that in the past. Why did you choose, 250 feet for mine, but, here the buffer is only 150 feet. I want us to answer, much prefer having that all discussed and talked out when there isn't an application sitting in front of us.
That's understandable.
Yep.
Yeah.
And right, having the 150 feet as a standard is nice. You start from the standard instead of just from nowhere.
Right.
I just looked at minimum transitional buffers and those apply during site plan review.
Correct.
Which comforts me because the fence thing or I want to put a pool in thing doesn't require site plan review.
Correct.
So it is, as you thought, during the major developments. So I think this will be a big help. And if we find that we need more, we can certainly look into that. But again, for the reasons we talked about, it could get to be a little burdensome if we go too far.
I mean, one of the things even the people who have the historic site homes can put a pool in their backyard.
Right.
And they can put in the
10.
fence.
They would need an Article 10, right?
No.
For the pool? I don't remember what triggers
It's
it.
only if it essentially affects the view shed from the road. So if it's behind the building.
Right.
Now, if it's something, some monstrosity that's going to affect the view shed, right?
Right.
Not necessarily a pool, but let's say a 30-foot tall barn that stretches from property edge to property edge, that would come under Article 10.
Right.
so the same thing with the neighbor, if they fence in their backyard, that's not going to affect this house. If they were to try to bring a fence, now granted, they already have issues as you get forward into the right of way, but the point is, if they were to bring a fence right up along tight to the property line as far forward as possible, that could arguably affect the view shed. And that one I would see, if we've written it as such, should or could come under Article 10
Right.
review. The problem you want to create is you don't want to create neighbor v. neighbor situations where, oh, please don't declare your house
That's what I was thinking.
historic. Now, the thing I will point out, there is an advantage to an Article 10 review, and that under the Article 10 review, we have the authority to grant variances.
Right.
And we do not charge for an Article 10 review, whereas anybody who's going to get a variance from the zoning board has to pay the application fee. So there is a cost savings to the historic homeowner. And again, we talked about that specifically because these homeowners are helping preserve our heritage. There's typically additional costs associated with doing that, and not just the additional legal burdens of Article 10, which aren't really that heavy, to be perfectly honest, but just in terms of, it costs more to maintain an older house than it does to maintain a modern house. And so, I like that we have, and we're working on some additional ones, some benefits to those residents who are willing to take on essentially, being custodians of some of the town's history. So like I said, when you read the wording of Article 10, we came to the realization that they don't have to then go, if we grant it, it goes straight to building permit. They do not have to go and get a variance. So effectively, we're creating a variance for that property, thus saving them that money. And like I said, I think that's great. So it's not all bad, is my point.
Right.
So there was some talk about a registry local and the national registry of these homes. And been any talk about doing anything more national?
So in terms of, I think the code actually says town, state, or federal registry, any of the registries. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yeah. It includes any of them. So if you are part of if you're a local, state, or federal, any one of those will trigger the 150 buffer.
Right. And to answer your question, Rob, that's completely up to the homeowners. Some choose to go that route. Some choose to just do the local route.
Okay.
Anything else?
Got my-
Consider adopting updated COVID procedures for town hall. So we had a lot of discussion as to whether this requires town board action or not. Because there's some minor potential affecting of pay with regards to whether it's getting some additional full-time paid, because part of the problem is the FFCRA, and I think I finally got the letters right, is essentially ended. It was not extended by Congress. And so, we're looking at different things that we can do to help and to clarify who is authorized to get paid time off and who is not. And so because of that, I felt at least that it needed to come up for town board approval. Do you agree, Don?
I think you can't go wrong with it that way, at
Right.
least. Yeah.
I'm just afraid because, like I said, potentially, the other thing in there too is there's some things in there in terms of the policy. We've been serious about this policy, and when people violate our COVID policy, there have been ramifications and repercussions. And so again, I just felt better if the town board approves it. Now, we wrote it in such a way that one of the things, it's already changed 3 times since we first put it out, not because of our edits, but because federal, state, and or county rules changed. And so we've written it in such a way that if there's any changes required because the background rules and regulations have changed, that it doesn't require any board update. It only requires a board update if there is a substantive change that is not being driven by a change in law.
Right.
So if the town itself is just deciding we're going to change our policy based on nothing else changing, that would need to come back. But if it's that they determine that the quarantine period is 7 days, then it would change to 7. If it determines that they determine that the quarantine extends to 21 days, then it would go to 21 days. It's those kinds of changes. Again, they're being dictated by laws beyond our control. So we're matching what those laws say. Sometimes we'll go above them. Will require a little extra safety, and some of it also depends situationally. So the point being, if you're somebody who is you're in an office with a lot of other people, and especially if you're dealing with the public, that's a different situation than, for instance, one of the things we've talked about a lot is if there is a driver who has tested positive but is asymptomatic, that there's no reason that they couldn't be alone in a truck. And under county, state, and federal requirements, essential workers can report they're supposed to separate themselves from their coworkers. So, the thing we talked about, the challenge you have there is they couldn't have a wing operator in the plow truck with them, for instance. And obviously, if they're symptomatic, especially with any symptoms that can potentially affect their driving, they would not be behind that wheel. But, a lot of times people who are positive or, have tested positive or had an exposure event and otherwise have to be quarantined, if we kept all those people out, we might not have enough people to do a plow run. So, that's some of what we're covering. And, as we look at this stuff, it's an ever-changing situation. As vaccine goes out, I just asked the county and the state for clarification in terms of vaccinations specifically for highway, town highway CDL operators, commercial driver's license for those who don't know CDL. Because as I point out, if the streets aren't plowed during a massive snowstorm, your emergency vehicles aren't getting there. And as we know, we've had a hit or two to some of our DPW workers, because again, it's an insidious virus that it's highly transmissible during an asymptomatic state. And so if one person gets it, doesn't realize they have it, even with social distancing and masking, it greatly reduces the risk, but there is still some risk that they could spread it to other workers. So I've approached to see if they will be covered under 1A and 1B, which actually started today. So when I hear back, I'll let everybody know. But there was a section in there for public transit. And so I'm saying, hey, they weren't expressly listed. I'm saying you should include snow and ice removal plow drivers. Now, again, the guys who clear the sidewalks and the guys who clear our parking lots at our town facilities, it's not the same level of essential. So I think that will be the next tier down. But the guys who have to keep the roads clear so that emergency vehicles can get through, I think they're on the same level as the emergency operators. But we'll see what the county and state rule.
Yeah, no, I think that's great to advocate in that way. I was just wondering if you had any sense of how many people are willing to take the vaccine, because I know it's optional and there's a lot of people even in the healthcare field that have opted out.
I don't know that answer. It hasn't come up yet, or if it has come up, it hasn't risen to my desk.
Okay.
But again, the more you have, the better. you might not be at herd immunity, but you might be at what I'll call herd resistance, right? That if half the people are immunized, it reduces the chance of any random contact that I'm going to catch the disease.
Yeah.
Or that I'm going to transmit it if I'm the one who's positive. So, again, I don't know. I do know a couple of our DPW folks have gotten their first shot already because they are part of fire district. So, I have no idea how many, what percentage would choose to opt out. I just would like it to be available to them if they would like to opt in. Any other questions on that? The intermunicipal agreement, we're getting pretty close. I was hoping to have it ready for now. I told Jenny there's no way I was going to get it done, so it's just going to be info only for now. Even so, what we wouldn't be approving the draft anyways. We would be approving, in other words, so let's say once we have it drawn up, we then enter into it with an adjacent town. That's what we would be approving. So if we enter into it with Chi-Li, you would authorize us to sign it with Chi-Li, to sign it with Rush, The way we decided to go, we looked at a couple different ways to do measure, and we're gonna just go with the direct expense. So in other words, whatever we'll publish essentially all of our, I don't know if publish is the right term, it'll be included as an addendum to the agreement, but we'll have the rates of all our individuals. So if one of them, and only those individuals are available for loan, so to speak. So again, if we get a call and they assign, Joe Smith to go drive in Chi-Li, Chi-Li would pay his loaded rate. We already have vehicle rates there's two different burden rates. One is for just salting and one is for plowing. Because when you're doing a plow run, when that plow is down, it puts a lot more wear and tear on the vehicle than when that plow is up. So, again, they'd be reciprocal agreements. So again, if Chi-Li loans someone to us, we would pay their loaded rates and we would pay their vehicle loads depending on what service we were asking them for.
So do you see this as adjoining towns like a Brighton and a Rush, or where needed, as you're talking about, where needed?
So the agreement would be in place ahead of time so that on an as needed and as available basis, so obviously if Chi-Li doesn't have any extra people, they're not going to lend it to us.
Right.
But if we suddenly find that half our crew is out and we're 2 people short to do a full run, we could call up Chi-Li and say, hey, do you have 2 extra people? Right. Or conversely, if they have the need.
Gotcha.
We'll look at the different rates because we're paying full up rate. We may find that Brighton is priced out of our budget.
Okay. Yep.
And that's based on memory. I seem to remember that they pay significantly higher, but there's others who might feel the same way about us, right?
Yeah, but when you got to get your snow removed.
Right. Oh, exactly. And so we might have one of those where here's the order we call based on,
Right.
but some of it's also going to be where is the snow belt? Because as you know, it can be snowing in northern Henrietta and southern Henrietta, it's nothing, right? In which case we could probably call the Rush, right? Whereas if it's reversed, we're certainly not going to be calling Rush, but so it's just, again, on an as needed and as available basis. If the winter keeps going like it's been going, it will have been an academic exercise only. But, it's one that I think is worth doing. And again, if we knew we had a major storm coming, I'd want to execute something quickly and, but like I said, we're pretty much there. We just got a few, so I've been taking the county contract, bringing over a clause, changing it accordingly. on some of the questions I've asked Don up front, but basically I've got to bring over the last few sections and then hand it to Don and say, look this over and make sure it's good. And then the idea is we're going to share that throughout. There's another town doing the same thing, by the way, and we'll probably compare and contrast. And we're going to share it through the Monroe County Supervisors Association so that everybody can share in the work. And that way, and we'll just go from there. And if we like the other one better, we'll use theirs. If they like ours better, we'll use ours. If we want to merge a little bit of the two, we can do that as well. So, okay.
Yep, great idea.
So if you remember this past summer when the governor put out the executive order saying that restaurants couldn't have dining, but they could have they couldn't have indoor seating, but they could have outdoor dining. We had created a procedure for the issuance of temporary outdoor seating permits. Because there has been a huge call for increased testing and vaccination. There are some folks who, in fact, there's one who already came in on Friday with an interest in opening up a testing facility in, I'm trying to remember what the name of the plaza is. It's the old Tops Plaza. You know, it's Jefferson Plaza. It is Jefferson. I was going to say that, but
That's what you said to us.
yeah. I seem to think that's what it's called, but I'm not 100% positive. The plaza names change too much as far as I'm concerned. But it's basically the northeast corner of Jefferson and East Henrietta Road. Existing storefront, it's a month-to-month lease because when enough people are vaccinated, it goes away. The problem is if they were to go through the normal, because of the designation, for whatever reason, and I added it to our list of code things to look at, medical facilities are not a permitted use in commercial B1. You need to have a special use permit to put them in there. Interestingly enough, if it's medical for animals, that is an allowed use in commercial B1. So I don't know why.
We like animals more than we like people.
Apparently.
We have more, yes, we do.
Much easier to deal with.
Is it going to be?
We are in political committees, so, that's easy to understand.
On this,
An indoor
Sorry.
facility or outdoor?
Indoor facility.
They're actually going to, I'm trying to think what's empty in that plaza.
There are a couple
There are a couple
storefronts that
small
are,
ones?
yeah, small
Small
storefronts. It's
ones.
nothing that big. Now one of the things we required them to do is they need to give us a traffic plan, because depending on,
Plaza's busy.
right, depending on what the impact is there. And I think someone was saying, I don't know, they gave us the address, and when I look where it lands, I don't know if it's still there, the Battery.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
the
yeah.
battery.
So it's on that end north.
So I think the battery place is near the Pita Pit or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's over in that,
That
from,
area, there's like a wood shop, woodworking store there, and then.
Look at the
Pita Pit.
shopping. So
Right.
she knows all the stores.
I've just lived.
This
I've
is-
I
lived
do
in
know the
that
wood
area.
shop. I know all those stores too.
Yeah.
this is the one, okay, so you're talking the plaza, but how about the one in the vaccine for the Dome Arena? Are they gonna be
I've
able-
got that separate.
Oh,
That's actually already has approval, and that was I want to mention. That's
Okay.
not under this.
okay.
So previously, it was actually done a few years ago. We'd worked with the County Department of Health to look at, now they didn't think about COVID vaccines, obviously, but they envisioned, whether it's Hep B, some other type of outbreak that would require mass inoculations. They looked at different facilities where we could do that. And the two that they've approved in town is the Dome and the Rec Center, actually. And so in looking at it, they went with the Dome, especially since the Dome can't have, well, it's not just, we have decent parking here too, but the Dome can't have any other stuff going on in it, right? You're limited to 25 people. That kind of kills everything that goes into the Dome. So it makes a lot of sense to have it there. So that's actually already been approved. But that approval is being done through the county. Again, we laid that plan out a couple of years ago. It's just, Chuck, if you're on, do you remember what the name of that program is?
Yeah, it's called the point of dispensing or pod.
Pod, that's what I was trying to remember. I could not come up with it, pod. So, you know, it's a program, like I said, and they went in ahead of time and they figured out what the traffic flow was going to be, because again, they were looking at it specifically for a contagious outbreak. So they were looking at social distancing. They were looking at, you know, paths that the incoming folks separated from the outgoing folks, and that there was health screen checks, and then, you know, screened areas where you actually get the inoculation. So that's all set up as part of that program. So they're essentially activating it, for lack of a better way to put it. But this other procedure, you know, again, the idea is we have someone who's coming in for testing. We don't have one for vaccination right now, but when we were writing this up, Kevin and I were like, we might as well include vaccinations because we could see it coming down the road. I don't know that there was a last minute addition feedback from Don to the policy. I don't know if it made it into the packet. It will be in there by Wednesday, but it was basically in the standards. We have a clause in there that says that they must have, you know, provide demonstration that they have the proper authority. So any medical certifications, anything else necessary to do the testing or the vaccination. But, you know, again, the idea is they would come in and they would do a special events permit, and it would last. We had looked at the previous one we had done went to the expiration of the executive order. And then they had some amount of time to switch over to a permanent special use permit, et cetera, and so forth. I said, rather than do that, let's just use a hard calendar date. This pandemic damn well better be over by the end of this calendar year. And then we didn't give them any extension because they know it's going to end in December. If they want to continue beyond that, that gives them a full year to go through the special use permit process. So that, you know, if they decide, hey, we want to keep this testing facility going for other stuff down the road or whatever. So that's what we're looking at.
Do we know the name of the company? I mean, it just says a company. Do we know who it is?
They haven't applied yet. So okay. I can find that out. I'll try to find that out.
And also, I mean, there's a lot of free is this if it's a private company, it's probably not going to be free testing like you get from MCC or Walgreens. They are doing the testing. It was something that's coming down from, I don't remember if it was the CDC or Federal Department of Health. I don't know the details about whether it's free or not.
They could have gotten a grant. We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that answer. But again, from a use standpoint, which is what we're really talking about here, this has to do with,
right,
we're granting, like I said, for whatever reason, medical centers are not allowed or require a special use permit in a commercial B1 zone. And the problem is that process is too lengthy.
Right.
For something that needs to be in place, next week.
So with this approval, we're not going to be, the town board is not going to be approving each of the individual applications. That's going to go through the regular.
It's through the building department, so it's Kevin Wilson.
Okay.
That's the same way we did the last one. And to be honest, I think we were talking, Kevin, what was it, like 3 or 4 that came through last time?
Yeah, we didn't have that many, Steve, for the outdoor seating.
Right. And I only expect 1 or 2 in this,
right,
to be honest. But, like I said, to do it, rather than fast tracking a special use permit, which I think would be a horrible precedent, since we had this procedure for the last time with respect to the pandemic, this to me made more sense to me. Because then again, if something comes in the day after, even if you fast track it, if something comes in the day after, we'd either have to hold a special meeting or they'd have to wait 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the gap between meetings, in order to get their approval, if the town board was the one approving it. So this just allows us to be nimble. And it's, again, it very narrows it down. It has, I think, sufficient requirements to make sure it's, good. And like I said, to me, it's in the public health's best interest.
And this is temporary to expire at the end of the year?
Correct.
Okay. What, is that stated in here?
No, it's
I
not
don't
in
know
the
if it's-
resolution.
I can add that to the resolution if you want. It is stated in the policy.
Steve, I will also put that on the special event permit. It'll be right on there for them to post
Yeah.
on site, the expiration date.
Yeah, so one of the things in the policy, they are required to have that permit displayed. We require it on an inside window facing outward. That way it's not subject to weather or theft. But yeah, I can add that to the resolution if you want. It is stated in the policy itself, but
Yeah, I see it now.
any other questions? Transfer of historic properties, Good Shepherd. So we're in agreement. I just ran out of time to get the IMA drawn up. So, again, we've got all the stuff in place. I just ran out of time. So this was going to be a consider, and there was no way I was going to get it done in time. So we switched it to info only.
Okay.
But nothing's really changed since the last time I talked to you, other than the school board. I don't remember when I last talked to you, but sometime end of December, the school board did approve the stuff that we put forth in terms of they will give us it's a non-binding statement of intent. Being that to let us use the parking.
The parking. That's-
And the other thing we did is our engineering department, specifically Chris Hauser, put together some potential layouts. Again, we're going to land bank our parking, but put together some layouts as to how we could do our parking if the school parking was ever not available. So, those were the couple updates, and there were some things that had to be worked out as to who's doing the survey, how are we doing the transfer. It's all the legal side of things that we're at now. So
So are we paying for those fees for the survey and that kind of stuff, or is that their side? Are we sharing it?
don't
know yet.
don't know that answer. For the survey for the redo, I was expecting us to pay it. For some of the, they did provide the material reports. They provided some other stuff. I don't know how we're going to handle I'll get that. I'll see if I can have that answer for you by Wednesday in terms of whether we would split closing costs, whether we'd pick up closing costs. I'll be honest, I'm not super concerned either way. We'll see what they have to say. Any other questions on that one? So something new that came out today. If you haven't already received the electronic, this is a hard copy. That's one for me. So this is this is Chapman's Corner Park concept plan. So the old Chapman Hotel, which is the southeast corner of Erie Station Road and West Henrietta Road. The building was bulldozed in 2007, unfortunately. It was one of the first homes in town. And so there's been an empty lot ever since. There is a little bit of the Three Sisters building is still there, which is basically the former ice cream stand. The idea is to turn this into a park. We don't have the money to do that right now. However, we have 2 town residents who have a accepted purchase offer in that they would essentially buy the property. They're going to do some of the initial cleanup. They've got some folks who can do some landscaping, some dead tree removal. They've been working with the current property owner, for instance, to remove the dilapidated shed and to clean out the contents of the Three Sisters building, with the idea that eventually the town would purchase the land and turn it into a park. Our historic site committee and our town historian were very excited about it because it is in the Four Corners historic site, historic district. On there, you'll see some of the pictures of the existing, somewhere in here. Oh, that's the one that I don't have. And then on the fold out, you'll see a printout of just the initial concept plan. We already talked about some modifications. So for one of the things, I want to remove the parking lot entrance exit out to West Henrietta Road. I think we're much better off having any parking just off of Treetop. I think it's dangerous to pull out that close to the intersection, and I suspect the New York State DOT would agree. We talked about potentially a central focus would be some kind of fountain. We don't have any fountains in any town park. Don't have a whole lot of details. The purpose of this is just to gauge, does this interest people or make people say, no way in hell? In terms of, again, when we would be committed to buying it, don't know. I made it clear that we don't have the money right now because of COVID. In a normal year, we could certainly fit that into the budget. You'll see the property details was 210, but on the front, the cost of the town would be about 166, was ballparkish. But that doesn't include the cost of, putting in the fountain and the other stuff on there. So just open it up to thoughts. I realize it's early on, but just wondering what people thought.
Oh, Mr. Supervisor, I had just got some calls I had to make on this because it's right next to my church. And I was wondering what was going on. I heard it was going to be a park, but there wasn't much information on it. So I'm happy to see that it's right here in front of me. I don't have to look any further for any information. There wasn't very much anyone could do there anyway. It was residential and it wasn't a lot of space, but.
I think it's actually commercial, but the problem is when the individual knocked the building down,
yeah,
they lost their, essentially the setback. The grandfathering is gone. And so the closest, when you look at some of the adjacent properties, it really destroyed what they could do there. Again, for those who want to see things preserved, they don't think that's necessarily such a bad thing that happened. Because, one of the questions, now it wouldn't have fit per se, but, I don't think people like what's happened in the East Hamlet. 3 of the 4 corners are now non-historic buildings. And so they were afraid with a non-historic building. So the idea of this is we would take the Three Sisters, we would remove the front wall, assuming, and basically put any header necessary. But the idea is it would become a kiosk kind of thing, with showcases on the inside that we would have some of the historic stuff about the hamlet. the four corners there.
That fits that district.
So somebody bought this
They're in the process.
privately and with
Correct.
the idea of we're gonna sell it to the town later?
Yep. And I don't know whether they're going to, in other words, are they going to discount it beyond, their cost is 166K.
So what if the town just decided they didn't want it?
Then I guess they turn around and sell it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But
They-
that
they-
parcel's been for sale for
5-6 years probably.
No,
Not
longer
more.
than that.
Longer than that.
longer than that.
Probably
It's been for
since
sale for a while.
2007 when he knocked it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Probably even before that, before he knocked it down.
Well, the owner was under the impression it was residential.
No, no, it's commercial. I had it listed at one point. so
Okay.
It's commercial.
Now, there is a lot of residential just down Treetop Lane. So, one of the things we talked about is like, there was a question of do we have any kind of gazebo type of thing or, someplace where I wouldn't want anything that would generate a bunch of noise. Because again, it is right next to a church. It's right next to a bunch of homes. So.
I think it's
Interesting.
it's a beautiful idea. Is there pedestrian access
There,
at the moment?
there is not at the moment. We had talked about whether to put a sidewalk against the curb. We thought we would rework the stone path some so that there's essentially pedestrian access from Treetop. We would work with the state and county to put a pedestrian cross from the southeast corner to the northeast corner across Erie Station Road. There is not currently anything there. There is a pedestrian crossing from the northeast corner across West Henrietta Road to the northwest corner, just north of Ken's Pizzeria there. So we'd want, and that sidewalk then goes all the way up Erie Village. So the idea is if we put in that last connection, it connects to the sidewalk that runs all along Erie Station Road to the east, connects to the sidewalk that runs all along West Henrietta Road to the north. There is no sidewalks going south from here. But obviously if they did come in and depending on which side they came in, and any crosswalk would have to be at the controlled intersection. The New York State DOT does not want, for a road like West Henrietta Road, there's no way they would want a uncontrolled pedestrian crossing. So yes, the plan is to tie it into the existing sidewalks.
Okay.
Long and short of it.
Yeah, that's
More the long. In terms of next to the church, we're planning on you can see that kind of loop road behind. We're pretty much going to be removing that road altogether. So the one that comes in off of West Henrietta Road and goes out on Erie Station Road right next to the church, that just goes away.
Okay.
The one addition I suggested we add over near the picnic tables, that we have like maybe a 2 or 3 swing set, just swings, nothing else. But if you're there having a picnic and you have little kids, any parent will tell you, boy, having a swing there helps you out tremendously. So, but again, it would be back in that area because that way it's very far away from West Henrietta and Erie Station roads.
The area.
Any other questions, comments?
Hey, Rob, how much parking does that church have? Do they use that side?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too.
Yeah, they used to use the side.
There is some overflow that does go onto there. They do have a parking lot to the south off of Treetop.
Right, directly behind the church.
Oh, okay.
I see.
You just can't see it with
Yeah, directly behind the
picture.
church, there's parking.
I see these pictures are a little bit older because
They are,
see the cart right in the church, the carriage didn't collapse yet on this picture.
right,
The church uses that a lot for overflow parking though.
Yes,
So it's going to hurt the church.
a little bit.
Because I know the church does events there and they've done things throughout the years.
Use it for tents and put stuff up there. Well, the
Right.
town doesn't own it yet. Maybe they can work out something with the owners that own it beforehand.
If it's
So
a
in
park,
terms
they
of
could
the
still use
tents,
it.
and I could see them using it that way for like the tents and stuff. The parking gets a little trickier, especially if we're gonna
Yeah.
put in stone dust.
Yep.
Now, with that said, arguably, the parking lot, we're gonna improve the parking lot over where the Three Sisters is, so, they could arguably use that.
How many
I
spaces
assume
is
it's only
that
at
gonna,
certain times.
how many spaces is that gonna hold? Because I know with the parking that they have there right now is, I mean, I know I used to go to little Three Sisters all the time with my kids. And the parking always there is really tough, and then people were all up and down Treetop.
Right.
So I'm just curious what they think how many parking spots they're going to actually achieve there, and is there going to be enough parking for this park that people aren't all the way up Treetop?
So, yes, the answer is there will be enough parking or else we won't do it.
Okay.
But, so what I was sort of looking at is, again, I would want to, if you look on the very front page one, the one that has the Jim Pappas in the corner, I would close off the front of that, the access directly out onto West Henrietta Road. And what I would do is I would expand it to the north some, so that essentially I've got a center lane with parking in both directions. So it would essentially double the size of that parking lot. But I can't give you numbers right now. We've got some work to do to take a look at this.
Right.
But obviously that would all go into a plan for the park. Again, I don't see it as a huge number of people in the park. It's not, but to your point, you don't want just a handful of spaces so that every time there's anything going on there, they're all up and down Treetop Lane, because that's not fair to the residents on Treetop.
I'm thinking it's going to become a site for a lot of photographers, weddings,
That I would agree.
graduation,
That would be
that
nice.
kind of thing, because it sounds like it's going to be real pretty, so it'd be a pretty spot for
Especially with
something like
the
that.
historic church right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
churches.
No, I
everywhere.
agree.
Three
Little
churches
church,
around
yeah.
there.
That is absolutely what I envisioned, which also goes back to why we thought having a center focus of a fountain of some sort.
Yep, very nice.
One of the things that'll be interesting is to reach out. So a couple of things we've talked about. We talked about doing a GoFundMe campaign. The reaching out to the School of American Crafts. Got to remember the piece. It's no longer School of American Craftsmen because that's gender specific. But to see if there's somebody who has that, whether they have it in-house or whether they know, got to believe they know local sculptors who would be, it would be interesting. I'd prefer to use local talent to sculpt a fountain if possible. Don't know whether that's going to be possible. No idea what, like I said, I know this stuff isn't cheap, but I want to take a look at it and put together a budget and go down the road. But like I said, I told them I'd bring it forth tonight. So this is the first time that they're letting it be known. They wanted to wait till they had an accepted offer before they talked about it, because they were afraid if word got out, would somebody then say, oh, geez, I should go get that before,
Right.
So I've known about this for a little while, as has a couple of folks on the historic side, but they specifically asked to keep it quiet until they had an accepted offer.
See that you're mentioning the RIT students doing a lot of this.
This isn't me, this is
Okay.
Ann and Bill.
Well, I was just
Was
going to
their
say
thinking?
the other thing you might want to do is look at the high school, because I know that my son took woodworking in the high school. He made it
Right.
gorgeous.
Mine too.
Well, we also talked about that the Rotary Club every year looks for a major project to do. It's something they could do here. Boy Scouts,
Yeah, it'd be nice to bring
Yeah, one of the
more of the
scouts.
community.
I would absolutely agree. One of the things we talked about is on the outside of that Three Sisters was a mural. I said, oh, that's one that I'd love to go to the high school.
Right.
You look at the talent level of the kids who
That's true.
did the
Bicentennial
the
drawings.
bicentennial drawings, exactly. I would love to do that same thing there. So I agree. same thing with the chess table. I think, like I said, where I think we start to get to the School of American Crafts is if you start to get to the fountain.
It would just be, right, it'd be nice to kind of hit a bunch of different people to make it really a community park.
Absolutely. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Anybody see why this is something that we shouldn't be doing? I mean, obviously there's still a lot of details to come forth, but
Worried about the money, where it's coming from.
right. No, understood.
But there's, we got, and I'm trying to look it up now, that sculpture that did, she's from Rochester, that did the sculptures for Frederick Douglass, who's well known. I forgot her name.
Yep.
Trying to.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not saying just look at RIT. I was
Right.
just using that as an example. I know there's, so like for instance, now he's since passed, but Wendell Castle was associated with there. Duff Whaley, who did the tiger statue at RIT, was associated through there. They don't necessarily. There's a.
Right. Wish I could think of that woman's name.
Yep. But yeah, I would definitely, and especially if there's somebody who wants to do it as much as a labor of love as a labor of profit.
Right.
So like I said, a lot of details coming forth, but it's just something that, basically, as they were looking at they have a strong interest and was part of the Farmland Protection Plan and a couple of the other committees on town. And, you always hear this thing about, well, if you want to prevent development, buy it. Right. So she did. Now, like I said, they sort of would like to see it as a town park. From a liability standpoint, they don't want to create a public park. But they were willing to essentially lock it down now with their own purchase, and they expect to carry the taxes on it for a year. Because as I said, and maybe more, they understand. But the point is, I told them that I just don't see any funds being available this budget year. So they were okay with that. Any other questions? So again, thank you, Ann and Bill, for your willingness to step up and help preserve some of the town. So GHD Consulting Services, we've used them in the past. The previous contract ran out. We have need of their services for at least 2 major projects. The RIT facility and the U of R facility over at the mall. Kevin, I don't know if you want to add something or if people want to ask Kevin questions. I see somebody highlighted it.
Yeah, that's all chargeback, right? For the developer?
It's covered by the large project initiation fee. So yes, all the costs are covered.
Okay.
Steve, to Mike's point, in the past, it was a pass-through chargeback. And like you stated, large project surcharge covers it now. Last year, I think, was it last year, Steve, we decided to change that policy?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Is that kind of risky? Because we don't, if it's just a chargeback,
It's not risky.
we know, okay.
I get a estimate up front before we sign the contract.
Right. So he'll know that it's with him. But when you look the size of the projects that these kick in on and that he needs those for, the large project initiation covers the cost.
Okay.
But again,
where I was going with it.
Right.
If it goes over and we already charged them for it.
Right.
That was mine.
Yeah, like I said, to Kevin's point, he would dial back the scope of work that they're doing if that were the case. But, to the size of these, to the size of the magnitude of these particular projects, it is covered within there.
Okay. And the only other question I had is, we've used these guys before, you said.
Yeah, we've been using them for years now, right, Kevin?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there nobody in Rochester that does? I see they're out of Syracuse. I mean, could we? Or did?
This is the company that my predecessor used for years with good luck, excellent performance from them.
Okay.
So to answer your question, we can certainly, if you look at most of the engineering contracts for professional service, we typically have two companies, so we can certainly take a look at to see if there is a, local firm that has a strong reputation and add them as a second consulting service.
Okay. Thank you.
But this is the one we've been using for some time, and we basically sent the thing, they gave us back the estimate, and then they realized, hey, our agreement's expired.
Okay.
So we said, oh, wow, you're right.
Okay.
So that's what we're putting in place. And, as we're doing with a lot of the stuff these days, we do have the ability to extend it. Any other questions on that one? So Mike, we will, at some point follow up to see if we can find a local company. If you're a local company that does fire prevention and code consulting services and want to contact the town, feel free to reach out to Mike Stafford. That's M Stafford at. No, feel free to reach out to me at supervisor@henrietta.org.
For the whole one person that's here.
It's on the web, Michael. A lot of people are watching this program.
That's right.
They'll rewatch it and see.
You do.
Someone had questions regarding the addendum to the cleaning services, or did Linda already answer that?
Got it answered.
Okay. Any of the remaining items?
We should probably discuss 13.
Why? Because I picked Mike?
Oh, and it's by Zoom, right?
It's all by Zoom.
Yeah, so yeah.
And you're the alternate
Yeah,
if I can't
well,
make it.
I just, speaking of which, I have convention coming up for work, and it's every 5 years in Las Vegas, and it's going to be in my office because it's, I just got elected as a delegate for that. And it is by Zoom also.
Right.
All by Zoom.
Yeah. So same thing.
By the way, I got feedback from a couple of you as to which stuff of the code you want to be working on. So I'll start to reach out to you, say which ones. Like one of the ones we're going to be doing on the restaurant thing. Kevin and I have had a lot of talk about this. We've had discussions with Don as to, if you remember, special use permits, variances, those stuff, they go with the property. And so, now the thing that gets funky with the restaurant is that there are some changes. Different types of restaurants have different types of uses. So what we've talked about doing is essentially we have a couple categories. And for instance, sit down, right, would be one. Drive-through. Late night operation, 24-hour operation, outdoor seating. So we basically have a bunch of categories, and when someone comes in for a special permit, they essentially check all boxes that apply.
Okay.
If they get granted that, it sticks with the property, and unless, if that restaurant closes and another restaurant comes in, if they fall into those same categories, they wouldn't have to come and get a new special use permit.
And that would apply even if they have to tear down the whole building and start a new restaurant.
From a special use standpoint, that is correct. Now, one of the things that we're going to have in there is if there's a significant enough change in impact, I shouldn't say we're going to have it. I'd love to have something in there. I got to work out with Don how we do that legally. But, as the example I used, there's a big difference between a Burger King drive-through and a Chick-fil-A drive-through from a traffic impact standpoint.
Exactly.
So,
But they're gonna require a site plan for that kind of change.
they still have to have a site plan anyway. So the point is we could do it under seeker at that point. And then basically the thing we would make clear in there is that if at the discretion of the planning board, that they think that this is a departure from what they have approved in their special use permit, that they can kick it up to the town board to review, that they would have to come in and amend their special use permit. So I'd like you to be in on that one, since you're the one who has the most stuff about the restaurants. So that way we can.
You are, Michael.
Was alcohol listed on that too?
Alcohol, yes, alcohol would be included as well.
That's Rob. Rob was asked that question.
What about ice cream?
Are you going to provide alcohol? You going to provide alcohol?
No. But potentially what might be on there though is the outdoor service window, right? Because again, that ice cream has that, which most other restaurants don't. If you go back to the olden days of McDonald's, they did, but that was before they came up with the concept of the drive-through window. So like I said, the idea is that you would fill in those categories, and if the use changes, then they have to come back in. If the use is the same, they're covered under the previous special use permit. You know, we've had some folks complain about it, the way we do our special use permits. Thankfully, none of them have sued us yet or pushed back, but it's arguably, you know, again, some of it is arguably overreach because they already have a special use permit. The other thing I want to do is I want to take a look at that. We make that applicable to all zones. Because today, if you're in the jungle, also known as the planned commercial district, the restaurants don't require any kind of special use permit. They just happen. And lastly, the thing I'd want to do is look at, Don, in terms of whether we can have any kind of notification requirement that, you know, that we essentially get a letter of intent that here's the new restaurant and we believe it meets the current special use permit because this, and this.
Yeah, they should, I mean, really, any applicant applying for a special permit should be telling us why they think they meet the factors.
No, I know. I'm saying for the people who, if those factors match, that they don't need a special use permit, if there can be some notification in that regards. I suspect the reason for the special use permit had to do with problems where there were, especially with you get to outdoor seating. So that's one of the other things too. It would go down to one permit, right? The restaurant permit would include, you wouldn't do one permit for a restaurant, one permit for outdoor seating. If somebody has an existing special use permit and they haven't previously had outdoor seating, when they go to add, they would essentially come in and amend their current special use permit. But it doesn't make sense to me that it's two separate special use permits.
You could also say on there, if there's substantial construction, demolition, then it would need to be amended or.
Right, at least
Because if you
reviewed.
demolish the building, I think it'd be reasonable to ask for a new permit.
Okay, we could do that.
Yeah, if you want.
So anyway, like I said, that's another one that we're taking a look at to clean that up some because, but as I was saying, I suspect it came in because they had some problems with, and I know one of them is Fireside, where it originally was approved as a restaurant, not a bar, and it was fewer hours, and it's right next to a bunch of homes, and then it switched to a bar. And so I think that's basically where some of this stuff comes from, not specifically that one, but instances like that where, okay, they added outdoor seating and it got noisy for the people next door. So, you know, that's the idea of what we're trying to place. One of the things is if you have a situation like that and we place a restriction on the special use permit, it would carry forward. So again, if it was going back to that scenario, if we put a restriction that, you know, this special use permit can never have outdoor seating, right? That would carry forward to ones that then come in. Now, obviously, they could come back to a new town board and get them to change that ruling and remove that restriction. But otherwise, like I said, any new restaurant that moved in under the old special use permit would have all those same restrictions that we put on it to protect the surrounding neighborhood from that potential use. So it's a way, you know, I think it cleans up a bunch. It makes sure that we carry the protections forward. And like I said, I was going to ask Mike to sit on that one since he's the one who's most vocal about the restaurants. And you saw from his email.
Get here, huh?
That's right.
What was that, Ron?
That way he can call me names, you know.
I said we can iron out those things before we get here.
Yep. I guarantee you there'll still be a couple of them mentioned, but. In fact, he had just done that to me, which was why he was selected as the alternate. And Jenny said, "Does Mike know?" Well, he'll find out at tonight's meeting.
Okay.
That's a good thing, Michael.
It is. Yeah, as I say, I don't need people to all think what I think. I already know what I think. I want different opinions. The other stuff's pretty straightforward. There's a couple sale and surplus. They're basically selling the vault, pommel horse, excuse me. The
Steve, can I?
Yep.
I don't mean to stop you.
Yep.
Is that the one, didn't we sell one before and it fell through? Is this the same?
Pam, are you on? I think this is a different one. I thought that vault that we.
She's tried to sell it in the past. I can get clarification on that for you. I don't know if it's the same one that you've talked about. She's been trying to sell it for a while.
Yep, because
It might be the very same
right.
one.
And I was wondering if it was the same person buying it because when I read it, it just sounded very familiar. That's why I asked.
Well, I seem to
think
think though we had a vaulting horse as opposed to a pommel horse previously.
Okay.
I do think we sold a vault. Yes, you're right.
Not that it's a big deal. I was just
No,
curious.
I think this is a different one.
Okay.
But yeah, she's been going out searching for a buyer and she found one. So, and then we've got some of the stuff in the library. We brought Captain Fay from the sheriff's office over to look at some of the shelves and cabinetry in the old library to use in their new facility. And so he grabbed some shelves to use in their evidentiary room. So some of them are old card catalog and other stuff like that. So Adrian was very happy that they're finding a new life. And then the traditional, you know, business as usual, as Chris would say, in terms of the budget transfers, personnel items, bills payable. Anything else before we move on to minutes?
Lisa didn't want to do my bills payable.
No.
I told you, I don't care. I'll do it. It doesn't bother me. I'll be your backup. How's that?
There you go. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to accept the minutes from the preceding town board workshop meeting and from December 28th.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Anything else? Hearing nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Supervisor.
Hearing no objections, meeting adjourned.